Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Under the Macroscope, Skybound Capital's weekly podcast series in which we discuss various macro issues affecting economies around the world. And a great pleasure to welcome Skybound Capital Senior Research Analyst Sigmund Thetard onto the call today. And this is not Sigmund's only area of expertise, but it is one of them. It is cannabis. And the use of cannabis medicinally around the world, how regulations are changing on a rapid basis, and how there's been a broader acceptance of cannabis in a number of economies and countries for medicinal use. So it's an industry that's worth following, and one that Sig has spent a lot of time and effort researching. So Sigmund, welcome to Under the Macroscope, and perhaps you could start by giving us a brief history of the cannabis industry and its use, obviously recreationally, and in more recent times, medicinally.
Thank you very much, Matt, for the opportunity to be here. And firstly, I think when people think about cannabis, the first image that comes to mind is a joint smoking hippie in his camper van with surfboards on the roof, cruising up and down the highway in California in the 70s. And funny enough, that is not true anymore. The industry has grown, it has become a little bit more mature, it's moved out of its teenage years, and it is now a significant investment opportunity as it becomes more legalized. But let's first step a little bit into the biology of the plant. Cannabis has got various cannabinoids inside its system, and there's roughly 60 cannabinoids of various types that have been identified. For our purposes, what we do is we classify cannabis as either high in THC content, commonly known as marijuana, weed, or pot, or if it has a THC level less than 0.3%, then it is classified as hemp. In California, let's take a step back. In the States itself, cannabis or hemp has been a cash crop since the 17th century, up until the 1930s, where the federal government decided to implement the Marijuana Tax Act, whereby it legislated cannabis for either medicinal purposes or certain industrial uses. By the 70s, which is roughly the time that our joint smoking hippie was cruising up and down the highway, marijuana was classified as a Schedule I drug by the federal government, which means that it had no medicinal use and a high affinity for being addictive. In 1996, that same joint smoking hippie has now suddenly become an upstanding member of society and was tired of being under the threat of being jailed or having a criminal record because of possession of marijuana. And California voters voted into legislation that medicinal cannabis can be legalized. So it can be used for medicinal purposes. This kickstarted the process whereby the rest of the world started looking at the legalization of cannabis, either for medicinal use or for adult recreational use. At the same time, what you had is cannabis actually started becoming part of the mainstream. As an example, Colorado, there are more cannabis dispensaries where you can go and buy recreational cannabis than what you'll find a Starbucks store in a ratio of 3-to-1. So industry has taken note. It has entered the mainstream, has got a lot of purpose. It can be used to regulate your moods. It can help you to sleep. It can help you for appetite. I mean, everyone jokes about getting the munchies, and it's very useful for pain management.
So there's obviously legalization, a relaxation of regulation that has occurred around cannabis for this use. And that appears to be led by North America, with Europe, could we say, lagging slightly further behind? Is that a fair comment? And what is the pace of acceptance?
Correct, Max. So as I mentioned, since 1996, when California voted for medicinal cannabis, actually California has now become a fully adult recreational state. Normally what happens is regulators look at it, and what they'll do is they will legalize it or decriminalize cannabis for personal use. So, i.e., you can grow a plant in your backyard and you can grow it for your own use. And you can do with it whatever you want as long as you stay in the confines of your residence. The next step then is to create legislation around which you can use it medicinally. To do this, the regulators ask the cannabis producers to completely track and trace from seed to sale all the cannabis that is produced. And you can go to your GP and ask for a prescription, for instance, for pain medication, if you need it for multiple sclerosis, glaucoma, if you're undergoing oncology treatment. There's a variety of applications, and you can get a script from your GP. The next step, and this is the important step, is the regulators will then implement adult recreational use, typically for adults older than 21, and the level of usage then increases by 2 to 3 times. In in the United States, there's a little bit of a difference, and this is an important catalyst for the industry. At a federal level, the cannabis is illegal, but at the state level, various states have been legalizing, and roughly at the moment, there's 18 states and territories in the United States that you can use cannabis as an adult recreationally. There's a further 37 states that implement it medicinally, and the pace has gathered steam. Worldwide, in Western Europe and Australia, for instance, cannabis is regulated for medicinal use. And in various countries in Africa, you can get a license to export cannabis for medicinal use as well. So you can grow it and you can export it, you can refine it. You can do with it whatever you want, but it cannot be used within the country.
Yeah.
Because it's federally illegal in the States, what happens then is that the cannabis companies cannot open up bank accounts at the federal banks because the federal banks are afraid of being prosecuted. Because of that, you've got an industry where a lot of cash is being carried around in brown bags, and investors are very cautious about investing here. Similarly, companies that are looking at this, where they see the opportunity for cannabis, cannot invest because they're going to fall foul of the rules as well. So in the States, there are 3 important pieces of legislation that are attempting to regulate the space at a federal level. These are called the Cannabis and Opportunities Act, the MORES Act, and the States Act. And what this does is 3 levels. Firstly, it will deschedule cannabis from a Schedule 1 and move it under the control of the FDA from the DEA and the Justice Department, i.e., so if you possess cannabis, you will not go to jail. Secondly, it will start at a federal level, you'll start getting excise taxes being raised. Roughly, they're talking about between 5 and 20% of revenue, and this will go a substantial way of plugging the holes in the federal government's coffers. Lastly, the federal banks can now enter the space and provide banking services. You can imagine also what this will do for the asset management industry, who have previously been limited by their mandates, where they can now start investing into a very high growth and potentially very profitable industry as well. And lastly, companies can also now start investing because they can see this as a growth vector for their further revenue streams.
Yeah, and we've seen brands in other sectors picking up on this and making investments into the cannabis industry as the regulation loosens. So why do you think it's so important? There's obviously been a paradigm shift in attitude towards it, and more people experiencing the benefits of medicinal cannabis. So it really is shaping up, assuming that all the regulatory issues and the legalization issues can be sorted out satisfactorily. It's shaping up as a potentially massive growth area.
Correct, Matt. And I think there's maybe 2 points that we need to address there. Firstly, there's a social aspect of it with its medicinal uses as it comes to the fore. Secondly, it is potentially a high growth vector for the FMCG industry. So touching on the social aspect first, because cannabis is not well known and it hasn't been fully researched, The effects of it medicinally is still at a very, very early stage. A review done by leading scientists in the States have identified various areas, such as, for instance, the treatment of nausea in chemotherapy. It's also a treatment for muscular spasticity for multiple sclerosis sufferers. It can also be used as a treatment and is strongly recommended as being a treatment for chronic pain. And that is an important factor to consider. In the United States, opioids are prescribed widely as painkiller for people that have chronic pain. Opioids are also the largest cause of drug overdose deaths in the States as well. So you can see the social impact that this has had on the society. I mean, imagine the poor ER doctor that's coming and he has to deal with a drug overdose patient coming through the door. It is clearly not a good look. And cannabis is a much better and less impactful alternative to opioids in terms of chronic pain management. I've spoken to many people who have had severe injuries and they use it to manage their chronic pain. Secondly, in terms of the industry, many of the CEOs sitting in the FMCG sector are making their decisions around how they're going to run their companies. They are measured by their growth at the top line and at the bottom line, and they're also measured on responsible capital allocation. If they don't have high growth, then the industry or the investment industry will reward them with lower multiples and valuations. And if they can put together high growth revenue and profit streams, then they will get rewarded in their valuations and share prices, as well as in their salaries. A good example of this is the tobacco industry. If you look at British American Tobacco, its share price has halved from £54 to £27 over the last couple of years. That is because they're in a low growth industry, it's very heavily regulated, and the social impact or the social aspect of smoking tobacco is becoming more and more pronounced. As a result, they are looking for high growth vectors. So British American Tobacco, what it has done is actually has taken a 20% stake in a listed Canadian company that looks at CBD vaping products called Organigram. Other companies in the space, such as Altria of Marlboro Man fame, have invested in the Kronos Group. And on the alcohol side, Constellation Brands that has Corona in its stable, Corona Beer, has also invested in one of the largest companies in the cannabis space called Canopy Growth. This is important for them because cannabis has got a revenue growth of roughly 20% compound forecast for the next 5 years. This compares to single digit of roughly 5 to 8% top line growth for alcohol and tobacco as they run out of opportunities geographically and also in terms of opportunities in terms of their product portfolio. Many people are switching from tobacco to cannabis, and they're switching to vaping products. And in the alcohol industry, many people are substituting alcohol with cannabis. So our CEOs are looking at this and they're going, we really need to invest. As legalization happens, this will create an opportunity, not only because your corporate finance banks such as Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs can now support these ventures, but it will also help the investment industry to get involved and create value in the industry as well.
So clearly an industry with a very positive trajectory. What do you see in closing, Sig, as the real catalysts for growth in the sector in the near term?
Yeah. So Matthew, the big thing here is that the general attitude to cannabis has shifted over the years. If you look at polls being taken across the world, more than 60% of people are supportive of legalization. Many people are exploring, they're going online, they're looking at the benefits that cannabis and CBD and THC and the various cannabinoids can have for them, and they are using it. They are using it for pain treatment, they're using it for injury recovery, they're using it to go and sleep because they can't sleep at night. And it's a better alternative to do your normal prescription drugs that you can find. Many companies are also looking at it as included in their product space. I mentioned alcohol and tobacco as one, but you can also look at the cosmetic companies and the food companies who will look at this because cannabis and its products are easily infused into cosmetics and to food products, as well as alcohol and tobacco. So you have to sit up and take note, do your research, and think about how you can include cannabis into your investment portfolio going forward. Because you always want a little growth vector that can outperform as in your portfolio.
Well, see, absolutely fascinating. And dare I say it, this information has left me feeling rather relaxed for the rest of the week, which is always a good thing. Thanks for your time. Great to have you on Under the Macroscope for the first time. Hopefully it's the first of many as we explore other research topics from you and the team around the Skybound Capital Group. Don't forget you can download Under the Macroscope at Apple, Spotify, and the Google podcast platform for Android. And this and all the other past editions of the Under the Macroscope podcast are available at our website, www.skyboundcapital.com. Thanks once again to Sigmund, and until next time on Under the Macroscope, have a great week.